On my birthday, my daughter-in-law left a box of chocolates on my porch. The next day, she called. "Have you tried them yet?" I replied, "No. My accountant gave them to her grandchildren." As a former forensic auditor, her panic told me everything I needed to know. If this story resonates with you, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments which city you're watching from. We'd love to know where our community is growing. That morning, she called to ask me if I'd already tried those chocolates. Her voice had that careful quality, too firm, too polite. It was the voice of someone reading a script they've rehearsed in front of the mirror too many times until it's empty of any trace of spontaneity. "Did you like them, Ramon? The ones I left on the porch the other day?" She paused long enough to make me wait, a psychological pressure tactic I've seen 1,000 times in interrogation rooms. "Ah, those," I said, keeping my tone light, almost nonchalant. "I gave them to my accountant, Pilar. She took them home for her grandchildren last Friday. She called me yesterday to tell me the little ones loved every piece." Silence. 3 full seconds of a chilling silence that filtered through the phone line like a draft under a poorly closed door. "What did you do?" "What, Ramon?" Her voice lost its courtesy for an instant. "They were expensive. They were from a limited edition from a pastry shop on Serrano. I ordered them especially for you, thinking about your blood pressure." "That's very kind of you, Natalia." "Really?" I replied, staring at the garden. "Carmen will be moved to know you care so much about me when I tell her in my prayers." She hung up without saying goodbye. The busy tone echoed in my ear like a verdict. I sat by the window and watched the rain fall on the back garden of this house in Chumberry. It's the same garden where my son Javier used to play soccer every spring until he broke a window. The same one where his father taught him with infinite patience to prune the rose bushes we religiously planted every March. Here, 41 years of family history have quietly taken root between the granite and the ivy. The chocolates, of course, were on my kitchen counter, unopened, exactly where I'd left them after a visit. I hadn't given them to anyone. I'm not cruel enough to give poison to a friend's grandchildren. But the sudden panic in her voice, that break in her tone's frequency, told me everything I needed to know. My intuition hadn't failed me. Allow me to take you back to where all this began, because disasters, the real ones, don't start with a bang or a box of sweets. They start like the most complicated audits, with a small accounting entry that doesn't add up, with a cent missing in a column of millions. My name's Ramon Vasquez. I'm 69 years old, and my back is a bit stooped from leaning over account books for so long. I spent 32 years as a forensic auditor at a prestigious firm in downtown Madrid before retiring. And before that, when I still had fire in my eyes, I worked for 2 years as an external consultant on financial crimes for the Guardia Civil. I know what fraud smells like before it's even committed. I know how people hide money under layers of shell companies, how they forge documents with terrifying skill, and how they rewrite their own stories to fit the mold of what they want to obtain. I spent my entire career learning to see the little things that others ignore out of laziness or overconfidence. My wife, Carmen, passed away 4 years ago. A relentless ovarian cancer, 18 months exactly from diagnosis until her hand stopped squeezing mine. She was the warmest person I've ever known in this often cold world. The type of woman who remembered the mailman's birthday, who kept a notebook with her grandchildren's favorite foods and allergies, who cried at the Christmas lottery commercials and never apologized for her sensitivity. When she died, she took a special kind of light from this house that no light bulb can replicate. I'm not going to pretend that loneliness isn't heavy, but loneliness also sharpens the senses. My son Javier is 41 years old. He lives 20 minutes from here in a gated community on the outskirts of Madrid, the kind with security and impeccable lawns. He lives with his wife Natalia and their daughter Sofia, who is 8 years old and is, without a doubt, the axis on which what's left of my life rotates. Sofia has Carmen's eyes, that particular shade of grayish-green that I used to call Autumn Lake when I wanted her grandmother to smile. She's also inherited the habit of collecting small, beautiful things. Smooth river stones, dried leaves with geometric shapes, sparrow feathers, or color bottle caps that shine in the sun. When she comes to visit on Saturdays, she always brings something new for what she calls our museum. It's an oak shelf in my office where we keep her findings alongside Carmen's old reading glasses and a photograph of the four of us in Retiro Park. A day in October when the wind almost blew our coats off. In the photo, Sophia is about 3 years old and squint her eyes in the sun, laughing at something no one remembers anymore. Javier is a good man, a man of integrity. I want that to be clear from the beginning. He works hard as a construction manager, loves his daughter above all else, and carries the grief for his mother in a strict, almost monastic silence, as men of my generation were taught in this country. Our relationship has always been solid, based on actions more than words. We watch soccer together, argue passionately about Real Madrid's lineups, and share beers in silence. We don't say "I love you" out loud. We prefer it to be understood in the way we shake hands. Natalia, however, is another matter. And I want to be fair because justice and objectivity have been the pillars of my profession. When Javier brought her home for the first time 8 years ago, I made a genuine effort to welcome her. Carmen tried even harder with that infinite patience of hers. Natalia comes from a wealthy family in Marbella, the kind that made a fortune in real estate during the years of uncontrolled expansion. She came into our family with a series of implicit assumptions about how hierarchies should work. It wasn't pure malice, at least not then. It was a way of looking at the world from a height we didn't share. She expected a deference, a kind of emotional vassalage for which our house, built on work and simplicity, wasn't prepared. Carmen used to tell me at night, "She'll soften up with time. Ramon, give her a chance." And maybe she would have if Carmen had lived to exert her influence. But after the funeral, something in Natalia's gears changed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to someone not looking for irregularities. She started accompanying Javier on his visits with unusual frequency, which at first I interpreted as a gesture of support after my bereavement. But soon the nature of the visits mutated. She started asking questions about the house. Casual questions dropped between coffees, but designed with the precision of an artillery reconnaissance. "Haven't you thought about moving to somewhere smaller, Ramon?" she'd say as she scanned the living room. "This place must be a nest of dust and bills for you alone. My cousin works in a luxury real estate agency and tells me that prices in this area of Chumberry are at an all-time high. It'd be a great deal, wouldn't it?" Even Javier, influenced by those comments at home, mentioned once, "Dad, your back has been hurting. Maybe it's time to look for an apartment with an elevator and fewer hallways." I'd respond with a friendly smile and change the subject to the league results. Then, about 2 years ago, Natalia started coming alone. She'd take advantage of Javier's business trips, the days he was away supervising civil engineering projects, to stop by and see how I was doing. She'd bring some groceries I hadn't asked for or offer to check if I needed anything from the pharmacy. I tried to be truly grateful, but my auditor's instincts started to go off when I noticed she always found an excuse to go into my office when I went to the kitchen for water. "A book that made me curious," she'd say, or "a photo I wanted to scan for Sophia," or the classic excuse that her printer had broken and she needed to print an urgent document. I keep my important papers, my life reduced to documents, in a fireproof safe hidden in the office closet. I also keep a file cabinet with old papers, tax returns from the last 30 years, deeds, Carmen's medical history. I noticed, after her 4th solo visit, that the file cabinet drawer wasn't closed according to my alignment system. I'm a precise man. 32 years of looking for forged signatures and fun diversions force you to be. The divider for the letter D, 4 deeds, was slightly tilted to the right. I didn't say anything. In my line of work, the one who speaks first loses the advantage. I simply sat in my leather chair, turned on the desk lamp, and started paying absolute attention, as if I were facing the most complex balance sheet of my career. The chocolates appeared on a Tuesday in March, exactly 8 months ago, coinciding with my 69th birthday. It was a beautiful box wrapped in ivory-colored tissue paper with a dark velvet ribbon and the embossed seal of one of the most exclusive pastry shops on Serrano Street. Natalia had left them on the porch next to the front door, accompanied by a thick cardstock note. "Happy birthday, Ramon. Thinking of you with all our love, Natalia and Javier." Shortly after, Javier sent me an individual text message to wish me a happy birthday, mentioning in passing that he knew nothing about the gift. Natalia had taken care of everything on her own as a special surprise. In an audit, when a movement of funds doesn't appear in the shared record, that's when you start looking for the leak. Something stopped me from opening them. I've tried to analyze that instinct with the coldness of an expert, because at that moment I had no physical proof. It was more the accumulated weight of 2 years of small discrepancies. The questions about the market value of my house in Chambéry, the disinterested visits to my office, the millimeter-level disarray in my file cabinet, and the way Natalia's warmth increased in direct proportion to the appreciation of my investment portfolio after Carmen's death. I put the box in a plastic bag and drove to the office of Pilar, my trusted accountant for 11 years. Pilar is a sharp-minded woman, trained in forensic accounting, who doesn't let a wrong decimal pass. I didn't give her too many explanations. I just asked her to have the contents analyzed privately and discreetly. She looked at me with that skeptical expression she reserves for when she thinks loneliness is making me paranoid. Then she saw something in my eyes, years of experience recognizing real fear, and simply nodded. I'll make some calls. 3 days later, I receive her call. Her voice was unusually cautious, lacking its usual professional sarcasm. Ramon, the chocolates had an additive. 3 pieces from the bottom layer had micro-perforations, almost invisible needle marks on the base. A very clean job. The lab has identified traces of aconitine. I was silent, processing the information. Aconitine is extracted from aconite, a plant that grows wild in northern Spain and is tragically sold as an ornamental plant with hardly any restrictions. In the right dose, it causes severe cardiac arrhythmias. In a man my age, with a case of mild hypertension, a fact Natalia knew perfectly well after so many family dinners, its ingestion would have been diagnosed almost with complete certainty as a heart attack for natural causes. What quantity, Pilar? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Enough that you wouldn't have made it to the hospital, Ramon, depending on whether you really like dark chocolate or not. I hung up and stared at the garden in the rain. I didn't call the police. I know it's hard to understand, but as a former consultant for the Guardia Civil on financial crimes, I know the risks of filing an accusation without a bulletproof structure of evidence. The investigation could be contaminated. Defense lawyers would question the chain of custody of the chocolates, and the whole case would fall apart on a technicality. I needed a pattern. I needed the economic motive. Aconitine wasn't an act of passionate hatred. It was the closing of a financial operation. If Natalia wanted to eliminate me, it was because she had already prepared the legal ground to inherit control of my assets. The house, the stocks, and Javier's share. If she was as meticulous as I was, the trail had to be on paper. I contacted Manuel Ferro, the lawyer who has handled my family's affairs for 2 decades. I asked him to retrieve my original will and cross-reference it with the registry of last wills. The answer came the next morning with a question that chilled my blood. Ramon, when did you decide to change your will? I haven't touched it since 2019. After Carmen's passing, I replied sharply. Well, I have a document here dated last October that radically modifies your provisions, Manuel said in a grave tone. It eliminates the trust that protected Sophia's education and names Javier as the direct universal heir, but with a substitution clause. In the event that Javier dies or becomes incapacitated, the entire estate passes integrally to his spouse. That's not my signature, Manuel. I know, Ramon. That's why I need you to come to the office right now. I went to see him that same Thursday. On his desk lay an impeccable forgery, made with a level of professionalism that's only achieved with access to original documents and time to practice. The seal came from a suspicious notary's office in Guadalajara. The date, October 14th. That detail was her first serious miscalculation. On October 14th, I was in Valencia participating in a national congress for retired financial professionals. I kept the hotel bills, my accreditation record, and most importantly, a group photograph from that same night's dinner that placed me 350 kilometers away from the office where I had supposedly signed that paper. I had a perfect alibi against my own forged will. Manuel, and I spent hours connecting the dots. Natalia had taken advantage of her visits to my office to obtain samples of my signature and old documents. She had contacted a network of documentary services in Guadalajara, already previously flagged by the College of Notaries for irregularities, to attest to a document I never saw. She had planned everything with methodical coldness for over a year. The will was the legal architecture that would support her new life. The chocolates were supposed to be the final executor, the full stop that would leave no trace. What Natalia never understood is that a forensic auditor doesn't stop working just because he retires. He simply has more time to notice the details that don't fit. I want to talk about Sophia because she's the center of gravity of this story, the only reason why an old auditor decided not to retire in silence. Sophia doesn't know the gruesome details of what I'm recounting. She's only 8 years old, and her world should be made of stone collections, secrets with her best friend from school, and the innocent anxiety of knowing if her basketball team will win a municipal tournament. However, in the months before the storm broke, I noticed something was breaking in her behavior. She was more withdrawn. She measured her words with a caution unbecoming of her age. She stopped bringing treasures for our museum without giving any logical explanation. When one day, while we were having snack, I asked her why she no longer found quartz or color bottle caps, she looked down her sneakers and whispered, "Mom says the museum things are a bit for babies now, Grandpa, that I'm too old to keep trash." Natalia was applying a textbook technique, emotional isolation. She was repositioning Sophia, moving her away from my influence, eroding our bond to become the only sun in her solar system. It's a devastating type of psychological manipulation because it's almost impossible to prove in court, but I recognized it for what it was, an audit of affections. I made a firm decision before the lawyers made their move. I had to secure Sophia's refuge. I sat her down in my office, surrounded by her old findings, and told her straight out, "I want you to know that this shelf is yours. It's not moving from here, not today, not in 20 years. You're welcome in this house every minute of your life, no matter what happens outside these walls. You and me. Sophia, that's a lifetime contract that nothing can break." She looked at me with those green eyes of Carmen, analyzing my seriousness, and suddenly she wrapped her arms around my waist, squeezing with that desperate strength children have when they feel the ground shake. "I know, Grandpa," she said. It was enough for a numbers man like me. That was the only figure that added up. Then came the bitterest part, the conversation with Javier. I need to be emphatic about this. Javier knew nothing. I've audited every memory, every gesture, and every document 1,000 times in my head. There isn't a single clue, not an intercepted communication, not a testimony from the judicial investigation that suggests my son was an accomplice. He was being used with the same coldness as I was. The forged will benefited him, yes, but Natalia had designed it with a reversion clause. She was the final beneficiary if something happened to Javier, or if he was declared incapacitated. My son was a mere conduit, a tool on her balance sheet of profits. I went to his house one Saturday in May, taking advantage of Sophia being at a birthday party and Natalia at her yoga class downtown. I asked Javier to sit with me in the kitchen, the place where real decisions are made in Spanish families. I put a blue leather folder in front of him. I said nothing. I let the weight of the paper speak first. Javier turned the pages with agonizing slowness. The copy of the fake will with the seal of the Guadalajara notary's office. Pilar's toxicology report detailing the concentration of aconitine, Manuel's legal analysis, and the audit I had completed myself. It revealed a pattern of micro-transfers from a joint account that Javier barely monitored to a limited liability company based at a ghost address in Marbella. The silence that followed was absolute. When Javier looked up, his face was that of a man who has just seen his house collapse at his feet. It wasn't surprise. It was the pure devastation of someone who discovers that the person they share a bed with is a complete stranger. "Dad," he managed to articulate with a broken voice, "the chocolates. Did she really try to?" "I'm here, son. I'm fine because I sent them for analysis before trying the first one. My instinct saved me, but now I need your common sense to save us all." He put his hands to his head, sinking into his thoughts. I didn't try to comfort him with empty phrases. There are truths that need space to settle. Outside, a robin was pecking at the hedge insistently, oblivious to the accounting drama unfolding in the kitchen. The coffee grew cold in the cups. Finally, Javier asked me what he had to do. I was clear. I need full cooperation with Manuel and with the Specialized and Violent Crime Unit UDP of the National Police, which already has the case. I need you to document every irregularity you remember, and above all, I need you to think about Sophia's future. He nodded with a new determination, that of a father awakening from a lethargy. The police investigation was impeccable. Pilar's and Manuel's evidence was so solid that the prosecutor's office didn't take long to issue the relevant orders. The Marbella Company was traced to a front man linked to Natalia's family. The Guadalajara notary, cornered by other investigations of irregular legitimization, agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence, confirming that Natalia had instigated the forgery, but the final blow came from the pastry shop on Serrano Street. A shop assistant perfectly remembered a woman with Natalia's elegance and features. She had bought the box 3 weeks before my birthday, took it, and returned 2 days later claiming she wanted to change the wrapping or that there had been a mistake, retrieving the same box shortly after, a behavior erratic enough to be etched in the employee's memory. Natalia was arrested on a Tuesday morning in June. Javier, following my instructions, had taken Sofia to my niece's house in Pozuelo the night before, feigning an impromptu sleepover. Sofia took her Explorer backpack and her favorite bird book. While her mother was being led out of the gated community in handcuffs, Sofia was in Pozuelo eating pancakes with syrup and watching a cartoon movie. I thank God or fate that she didn't see the patrol cars. She was safe in her small world of games while her mother's paper empire legally disintegrated. The legal proceedings dragged on for 8 agonizing months. Natalia faced criminal charges for attempted murder, aggravated fraud, and forgery of a public document. The full weight of her planning was exposed in one of the courtrooms at Plaza de Castilla. It was a methodical process where the prosecution presented the evidence document by document, as if they were dismantling a seized engine. Her defense tried to argue the unsustainable. They argued that the chocolates were a statistical coincidence, that the aconitine had entered the supply chain through accidental contamination at the factory, and that the Guadalajara will was a document I myself had tasked her with managing in a moment of lucidity that I now conveniently forgot. However, in law, as in auditing, facts are stubborn. Every defense argument disintegrated under the weight of the Valencia hotel check-in records and the testimony of the Serrano Street shop assistant. The jury didn't even need a full day of deliberation. She was found guilty on all charges. The final sentence, after the relevant appeals, is expected this spring, but the social and family verdict is already firm. Javier filed for divorce swiftly before the oral trial concluded. It was a painful but necessary decision, and most importantly, it was his. I didn't exert any pressure on him. My son reached that conclusion on his own, at his own pace, handling the disillusionment with that quiet determination he inherited from his mother. Javier is one of those people who smile easily, but whose spine is made of an iron that few suspect until the storm comes. Sofia is fine, all things considered after an earthquake of this magnitude. She's attending therapy with a child psychologist in Alcorcon, an extraordinary professional who specializes in traumas arising from serious family conflicts. The sessions are bearing fruit. Sofia doesn't always verbalize what she's processing. Children often keep pain in boxes they only open when they feel safe, but she expresses it through her gestures. Last month, during our Saturday afternoon, she brought 3 new pieces for our museum. A fragment of emerald green sea glass she found on a beach in Malaga, a small brass button that belonged to her grandmother Carmen's coat, and a note written in her childish but firm handwriting. For Grandpa, our museum forever. I placed that note in the exact center of the oak shelf. It's the most valuable document I've guarded in my 69 years. It's February, and I've lived with this reality long enough to begin to understand it, which is the step before acceptance. I'm not looking for forgiveness yet. Perhaps forgiveness is a luxury I can't afford in front of someone who risked the life of her own daughter's grandfather. But I understand Natalia in the same way I understand a fraudulent bankruptcy as a series of deliberate choices. She wasn't a fairy tale monster. She was a person who desired security, status, and control, and who convinced herself that the obstacles, including me, were negotiable. She made me an acceptable casualty on her balance sheet of profits. That's not madness, it's a moral choice. And choices in this world have legal and human consequences. That was her biggest miscalculation. She didn't fail because of the forensic trail or the witness from the pastry shop. She failed because she believed that careful and kind people can be fooled indefinitely. I've been a meticulous man all my adult life. I learned it in the big audit firms, and I learned it from my father, who was a watchmaker with a precise mind. But above all, I learned it in 40 years of marriage to Carmen, who taught me that paying attention to details is one of the most profound and honest ways to love. When you pay real attention to someone, you see them as they are. You see their fears, their shortcomings, and their shadows. Carmen saw everyone, and that's why everyone felt protected by her side. Natalia was seen too, only the result wasn't what she expected. The robin has returned to the hedge this morning, oblivious to trials and sentences. Sophia is coming for lunch tomorrow. She sent me a photo of a piece of quartz she found near her father's new apartment and asked me if it's museum quality. I replied that without a doubt, it's the piece we were missing. I've put the kettle on and stood by the kitchen window, watching the rain moisten the garden in Chumberry. I see the maple tree Javier planted 30 years ago and the stone bench where Carmen used to read in the sun. I'm still here. It's no small thing to be present, to be vigilant, and to keep watch. It's not an act of bitter distrust. It's an act of preserving what we love. To anyone who reads this and feels that sharp unease when a family member starts to take too much interest in their deeds or their health, listen to your instinct. You're not paranoid for protecting your legacy. Financial abuse of the elderly in Spain is a silent epidemic that hides behind family shame. Don't stay silent. Talk to your trusted lawyer. Consult with your accountant. Seek an external perspective that isn't clouded by affection. Your instincts aren't figments of your imagination. They are data accumulated over decades of life experience. The people who truly love you will never be offended by your caution. On the contrary, they'll celebrate that you take care of yourself because what they want, what Javier and Sofia want, isn't a balance in an account, but for you to keep being there, making tea every morning and guarding the memories on the office shelf. That's everything. It always has been. And as long as I'm still here, Sofia's museum will remain open.